I'd like to welcome all of you this evening to Norristown Area High School. During the next hour, you will hear many comments about teenage sexuality. The opinions that you hear do not necessarily reflect those of the school district. We hope to deal with this subject openly and honestly. To do so, we're fortunate to have with us some guests who have agreed to help us tonight. In fact, one of our guests was so eager to participate in this show that he was on hand this morning at 6:45 to get started. Needless to say, he has spent a long day, and we are happy that he is back with us. I'd like at this time to have our guests introduce themselves, beginning with Dr. Lipkowitz.
I'm Ronald Lipkowitz. I'm a medical doctor specializing in psychiatry. In addition to private office practice working with teenagers and adults, I have been a consultant for a number of years to both the Norristown Area School District and to the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit, working with teenagers. Also, I was a student through the Norristown Area School District from grades kindergarten through 12.
Hello, my name is Pat Mitchell-Brown. I've been an educator in the Norristown Area School District for the past 15 years, working on the middle school level, grades 6 to 8. My involvement with youth has been to listen to, counsel, and hear and address issues ranging from A to Z, if you will, AIDS to Zit. The middle school level is a unique age group in light of the fact that middle schoolers, their hormones are in full working order at that time. And they're a lot of fun to work with. And the issues, the social teenage pressures that they find themselves in makes for quite a unique educational experience.
Good evening. I'm Jane Bolton. I've been with the Class for Expectant Parents in Norristown Area School District since it began in 1973. During that time, we have had over 450 young people go through our program.
I'm Nancy Santangelo. I graduated from Norristown Area School District in 1984. I had my son when I was 17 years old. I now work for a law firm, and I go to school at night. I'm working on my paralegal certificate.
Hi, my name is Beth Antonelli. I received my doctorate in health education from Penn State University, and I'm currently a health educator at Westchester University. I'm primarily involved with the teacher preparation program and working with students who want to go into the teaching field, primarily health education. And I teach courses at the grad and undergrad level in human sexuality and consult with school districts on issues around sex education and programs.
Good evening. My name is Father Tom Herron. I'm a Roman Catholic priest. I've been a priest for 11 years. These past 7 years, I have worked primarily with youth in the high schools, archdiocesan high schools, Archbishop Kennedy in Conshohocken, and presently Bishop McDevitt in Wyncote, Pennsylvania. I'm working with a group of youth who go around throughout the entire Delaware Valley promoting the virtue of chastity. A group of 12 students from McDevitt who promote this virtue to their peers.
Thank you very much. If those of you who are viewing at home would like to have questions for our guests or to pose something or respond to something said in the audience, periodically a number will flash across the screen. Please call us and you will become a part of our program. What we'd like to do tonight is establish a dialogue, and a dialogue represents some conversation among our guests, the students in our audience, and the parents in our audience to try to deal with the questions that come up about teenage sexuality. Much discussion about sexuality throughout high school is just that, all words. However, there is some sense of subconscious competition. First, in knowing the most dirty jokes, then in knowing the most technical sexual vocabulary, and ultimately in having gone the farthest. Sexual knowledge and expertise is valued highly, and in some groups more highly than athletic or academic ability. The need to belong that teenagers feel requires us to answer the challenges that adolescent sexuality delivers. And I think that's part of the reason, a big part, why we're here tonight. Teenage sexuality. When I heard that this was going to be our subject, I have to admit I was a little bit scared. Because I think the first thing that jumped into my mind is that when you pose that question, students never get past the first three letters, S-E-X, sex. So one of the first things I really think we really have to do tonight is to attack this word sexuality a little bit. What does it mean? What kind of images jump into mind when that word comes up? It shows up in literature, in the stories that we read in school. What does it have to do with our teenagers today? And the easiest way I think to get at this is to ask some of our people who are here what comes to their minds when that word sexuality comes up. I'd like to start with some of our students, and then we eventually are going to move to three of our guests and ask them the very same question. What is sexuality?
I think teenage sexuality is the relationships and the interactions of teens today of the opposite sex.
All right. Let's have another opinion, another view from another student.
I guess it's the different problems and aspects of teen dating and growing up.
All right. And finally?
I think it's the decision of teenagers, whether they're dating or not, to have sexual relationships with one another.
Okay. Three perspectives that offer us some possibilities and some things to talk about as the evening goes on. Also, I'd like to call on one of the parents here, who is here. Interestingly enough, the parents of one of the young ladies that we have just heard from, and hear what his attitude is about sexuality and what comes to his mind when the word is used.
Well, I think it's the quality of being male or female and the differences or attractions to one another.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Lipkowitz, how do you react to this?
When I was first asked to participate in the panel, my first reaction was teenage sexuality. What do you mean? We're talking about sex, right? I'm still not sure that I can really distinguish it that much, although I suppose in one form it would refer to how we view ourselves and how others view us as sexual beings, as sexual human beings.
Thank you very much. We'd like to get two more opinions from our members of our guests. And the second person I'd like to call on is Dr. Sinelli.
I think it's real positive the way the three students that you picked responded, because it was interesting that they looked at a broader picture of sexuality. Typically, students will think of gender issues, or they'll think of biological issues or sexual intercourse. But what's interesting is they all looked at relationships, they looked at more the emotional, the mental, social types of things that go into sexuality. And I think that's what we need to really focus on is it's not just the gender biological issues as much as it's the idea that we're sexual beings from the time we're born to the time we go to the casket. And we need to address that all the time. I mean, you don't put your sexuality on in the morning and take it off at night. I mean, it's part of it all the time. So it's really interesting that the students picked up on there's more broader issues to talk about in sexuality rather than just the anatomy or the physiological parts of it. And I think it's real important.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a very important point to bring up. Father Heron, you also have some views on sexuality.
Yes, I thought that the students' responses were very positive too, along with the gentleman who spoke about it as a quality of male and female, and Beth's comments as well. I would just simply add to that by saying that sexuality is a gift that has many dimensions and many modes of expression. That right now, all of us here, even by the fact that we are listening, are expressing our sexuality. That it involves not just the physical, and a lot of times I think that's even confused with the genital expression of our bodies, but they're two separate in my judgment. But also our emotional, social, intellectual, and spiritual dimensions all go into our unique expression of our sexuality.
Okay, I'd like to introduce two quotes that have to deal, I think, primarily with this idea that everyone has picked up on, that sexuality represents more than just the physical and deals with the emotional and the social feelings that so many of our young people have today. In Harper's Magazine, a statement was made, and I'm quoting exactly here, "Young men and women seem to come together expecting little support or tenderness, and even when it is offered, they are afraid to accept it." That certainly has to deal with these emotional feelings. I'd like to pose two questions. One is whether or not some of our young people find that this is true, and maybe, too, we have two fairly young panel members here, and I'm not insulting the others of you, by the way, and Nancy and Dr. Sinelli, who maybe could talk about their own experiences in this area and how they feel. And the second one comes from a young lady who is a sex educator and an author of a book entitled Straight from the Heart, How to Talk to Your Teenagers About Love and Sex. And she said teen boys should be encouraged to concentrate less on proving their manhood and more on a girl's feelings, which again ties us into this area of the emotional in terms of how we respond when we hear the word sexuality. I wonder, Nancy, if either you or Dr. Sinelli could start us out, and then please, we'd like to hear from some of the students and anybody else in the audience who has some feelings on that. Does it matter to you how young men treat you young ladies? How do you feel about how you've been treated throughout your life as a...
I'm not sure about that first quote. I don't know where they were coming from, or where they were talking about the support and those issues. But the second one, clearly, one of the things that I try to stress a lot and has been a part of most of our curriculums is the idea of mutual responsibility. And I think that we have had a tendency in the history of sex education to leave out the male responsibility and the male role. And we've really focused on what the female needs to do. It's your job in terms of contraception, or it's your job in terms of saying no and all these other issues, and we've left out this other important person in this relationship. So I think that one of the things I do stress is, yes, feelings are extremely important, as is the role, as responsibility is. And that both people enter this relationship and both people have a responsibility to this relationship, depending on where it's going. So I think that that's one of the things we need to bring the male students or that individual into the program a little bit more and talk about their needs and feelings and have them understand what's going on in their partner's minds.
All right, Nancy, as a very recent graduate, how do you feel about this issue?
I agree very much. I feel that boys more or less don't care, and the responsibility is mostly on girls. I mean, if you get pregnant, it's your problem. You deal with it. I mean, we need education on both parts, on both sides, I think.
Right. I'm going to ask a couple of you present students, if you wouldn't mind chiming in here and saying about how you feel and whether you feel any the young men act any differently toward you these days, or whether it's pretty much what both Dr. Sinelli and Nancy have mentioned. And I would also like to encourage any of you, please, if you have questions, just let me know. Tug on my pants or grab my shirt or throw something at me, whatever you have to do, please, so we know that you have something that you might want to pose either to someone who has said something already or to another member of the panel, okay? Again, this is meant to be a dialogue, and it can only happen if people are asking questions and if we get some conversation going. 6 of you young ladies are sitting right here. I'm trusting that all of you date. I know that many of you do. How do you feel about the issues that these 2 young ladies have talked about? How do the young gentlemen treat you these days? Is it primarily your responsibility about what happens on a date, your responsibility on what happens in a relationship? One or 2 of you care to respond? Megan?
Okay. I think basically it falls on the girl most of the time. Today, I think there's been a change because the issue is becoming more prominent in society today. So a lot of things are changing, but I think there needs to be more of a focus on both sides, on both the male and the female in the relationship. And while I'm up, I would like to address the first quote from Harper's. As far as the support, I see in relationships today, I mean, at our age, I think there's just a need for companionship and someone that you can be with, that you can solely have a mate. And I think a lot of people are scared to get into a relationship like that because they don't know what's going to happen, and it's just like that feeling of you're not sure, you're not secure. And there's also, what should I do, and should I be doing something that I'm not? There are a lot of different questions that go into that. So the question of support comes up.
Okay, thank you very much, Megan. I'd like to hear from a couple parents here eventually, but I'd like to swing to 2 of the panel members real quickly, if I could, maybe 3. Pat, you're in the middle school, and therefore you're dealing with the kids on a little bit younger level. What do you find about how they feel in the area that we're talking about here?
Well, I just kind of like to boomerang a question back to you and the audience, Jim, if I may. I know that when we were coming up as a female teenager, many times the pressure came from males indicating that, well, everyone's doing it. And I wondered, just if that same kind of line is still being used, that pressure. Well, let's do it because everyone else is doing it. If someone could, from the audience could address that.
Preferably a student, I assume.
Preferably.
I don't think that's being used anymore. Either they realize how stupid it sounds, or it's not working as much as it did anymore, because anybody who wants to will, and if you don't want to enough, anyone by now will know that, so that they can get that across before something that's stupid and desperate comes up.
Well, along that line, though, if that is in fact the case, then I just wonder why then are there still so many teenage pregnancies? If it's a decision on the teenager's part to simply say yes to sex, then.
That doesn't necessarily mean saying yes to birth control, and it doesn't always work. I guess that just because you're not stupid enough to fall for a line doesn't mean you're not stupid enough to believe that I'm sterile, I've had a vasectomy.
Yeah, that's a good point. It just leads me to another question. With this, I wonder if there's a swing to conservatism since the AIDS scare and the rampancy of AIDS and VD, and I was wondering if teenagers are now taking a more critical look at sex and saying, well, gee, it's best not to engage in it simply because you can die. I was just wondering if anyone wants to
We have
address
a young
that.
lady here who also wants to talk, and she may well respond to what you just said.
Well, I graduated from Norristown in '87, and I'm now a sophomore at Bloomsburg University. And people aren't saying, well, everyone's doing it, but it's implied. And in Bloomsburg, there's not much else to do. I mean, we just got our first mall. That's the social environment. You party and you hook up. And it's not really said, but it's done. And I don't really see a lot of hesitancy because of the AIDS thing. I mean, high school and college kids think it won't happen to them.
Those of you who are seniors are not allowed to apply to Bloomsburg, just because of this comment. We want you to know that.
I'm curious if there is, even from the opposite side of the spectrum, of pressure that says that if a young teenager would be able to take a clear stand, be it male or female, and say, I am choosing to be chaste, would they then be labeled and have to deal with the pressure, well, you must have a hang-up. You really have a hang-up if you're choosing to be chaste. I'm wondering if people are saying that it's implicit here in the college level, it doesn't exist anymore, that shallow statement that everybody's doing it, so there's no pressure there. Is there any space and room out there to be able to say, no, I'm choosing to be chaste, and I feel that's the liberating posture?
We have a very fast response to that comment.
I certainly hope so. 100 years ago, when we graduated from high school, the girls who did engage in things like that were that. But now it is the girls who don't engage in any kind of sexual activities who are considered square or whatever. Relationships break up because the fellow might want to and the girl might not. And I'm raising a son and a daughter, and I see it from both sides, and it is out there that, yes, if they choose not to do this, I think they're looked at in a completely different way.
They're labeled that they have a hang-up.
Yes.
Yeah.
You really don't look 100 years old, by the way, just as an aside. Dr. Sinelli, I'm sure you have something.
To go on with what Father was saying, I think that what we need to work on with students today, with young adults, is if you make that choice, and that's one of your values, and that's one of the things that you want to vocalize, and that's okay, and they have to be able to realize that it doesn't matter what anybody else has to say. But that goes along with lots of issues, with drugs, with alcohol, with smoking. I mean, it's right down the line. But I think that if we work on the self-esteem and those assertiveness skills and those communication skills, then that's just going to happen naturally. And it's like anything else in life. When people don't like you, or they don't like what you do or what you say, it wouldn't be such a big deal in sexuality if this was a part of our life all the time. We could deal with this, and we could make decisions on what's good for me, what isn't. If you have a value system that's intact, I think it would be a lot easier, and it wouldn't maybe label them so much and be such a social issue.
Okay, good.
I think if we try to raise our children to be self-confident and feel good about themselves, and they can make these choices and not feel inferior or feel pushed into anything.
While I'm heading over here, Mrs. Bolton, you might want to respond too from your job and your work here in the district, because you certainly must have dealt with many, many girls for whom self-esteem was a critical issue.
A very big issue, and this is one of the things our program started to educate girls only. And we have realized that the education is an important part so that they stay in school. But all of these other aspects of their life are forever issue. And one of the things that we work on very much is self-esteem. I was thinking that how many times a young person equates love and sex as being the very same thing. And then I thought of the time when, not many years ago, the song Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll are all you need. And what message is this giving our young people? The movies, the television that they see. I think that now if you really love me, you will go all the way. And I think it is important for parents to be praising and setting some standards and discussing the communication part.
I feel that sexual relations shouldn't occur unless there is a strong relationship for it to be based upon. And in response to that, I don't feel like there's a lot of pressure. Like, I think you can take the stand if you don't want to have sex, you don't have to. It's not like it's a publicity thing at school. It's not like everybody walks around talking about you if you're not having sex. Nobody really knows.
If you have no goals, though, if you have no goals for your life, or you feel you've been nowhere, is this some excitement? Is this someone to hold you, someone to say, oh, you're really special? And so we have to look at all levels of young people. A level of a young person who has been motivated at home and has been held as a child and told they're pretty special and told that they're pretty neat. But suppose from 2 weeks old you were told you were greedy or you were bad, and you get to be 12 and somebody says, you're pretty neat, I like you. You know, are you going to respond differently? Are you going to have those different values?